He was on his knees, sobbing beside my apartment door, rain soaking through his $1,000 coat. "I didn't mean it, I swear," he whispered, lips trembling, eyes swollen. "I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just held the door open wide enough for him to see what he could never have again." Inside, laughter echoed from the dining room. My new life. My new self. And on the hallway wall behind me, framed in silver, was a single sentence I once begged him to say. "You deserve better." Her name was Alina Farrow, 32. A pediatric nurse at one of Charlotte's busiest children's hospitals. The kind of woman who never raised her voice, always stayed 5 minutes longer than her shift, and remembered every child's favorite color even when she couldn't remember the last time someone asked her how she was. For 7 years, she was married to Caleb Farrow, a corporate legal advisor with a jawline made for magazine covers and a mouth that could talk circles around boardrooms and baristas alike. To the outside world, he was the dream. Charming, presentable, charitable. He bought her flowers every third Saturday like clockwork. He smiled wide in every photo. He opened car doors, even when no one was watching. To everyone else, he was the perfect husband. To Alina, he was a stranger with familiar hands. A man who once whispered, "You're my safe place under the covers," but mocked her tears when her father died, calling her overly sensitive before falling asleep halfway through the funeral slideshow. A man who brushed her hair back during their first dance, but laughed when she couldn't get pregnant, saying, "Maybe it's nature's way of sparing us two more emotionally unstable people." He humiliated her quietly, effortlessly, with a smile that never looked mean, just superior. At dinner parties, when she didn't talk much, he'd place a hand on her back and whisper, "Try not to be so boring tonight, But Alina stayed, like she always did, because she believed kindness could change someone. Until Christmas Eve. She had just come home from a 16-hour shift. Her scrubs were stained with glitter glue and tears. She'd spent half the day comforting a 5-year-old cancer patient who wanted to surprise her mom with a snowman made of 4 pole parts. Her back ached. Her feet throbbed. But her heart felt heavier. Caleb wasn't home. Said he had a late legal consult. Alina didn't question it. She never did. She made herself a cup of tea, turned on the Christmas tree, let the colored lights glow against the silence. And then her phone buzzed. No contact name, no message, just a video file. She tapped it without thinking. The video began with a smirking blonde woman in a red dress, lying back on a bed Alina didn't recognize. She smiled at the camera and said, "You deserve to know who Caleb really loves." Then came Caleb, shirtless, laughing, drunk on either whiskey or affection, or both. "Alina," he scoffed. "She's fragile, like glass. You breathe too hard, and she starts to crack. God, she's so boring. All she does is work, nap, and cry when no one's looking." The woman laughed, high-pitched, mocking. Then Caleb looked straight into the camera. "But don't worry. She won't do anything. She never does." The video ended. Alina didn't blink, didn't cry, didn't even breathe for a full 10 seconds. She just sat there in her scrubs, her tea untouched, as the tree lights blinked softly behind her, like they were laughing too. The betrayal didn't land like a bomb. It slid in like a knife. She hadn't noticed until it twisted. She stood up, walked to the tree, and unplugged it. The living room went dark, silent, still. She stood there, staring at the dead lights, the phone still in her hand. Then, slowly, she whispered to herself, "Let's see if you're still laughing when I'm done." And just like that, something inside her cracked. Not like glass, like ice. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't even raise her voice. The confrontation was quiet. Too quiet. Alina stood in the doorway of their bedroom, phone in hand. The video paused on the frame where Caleb's lips curled into that smug, unbothered smirk. He was buttoning up his shirt like nothing happened, like this was all routine. When she said the words, "I saw the video," his only reaction was a faint shrug, then a smile. "You should thank me," he said, his tone almost soothing. Now maybe you'll stop clinging to this fantasy of yours. We were never happy. She blinked. Once. You lied. For years. He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne filling the space between them like smoke after a fire. No, he said calmly. I performed. That's different. Her voice cracked on the next sentence, so she swallowed it instead. He walked out before she could gather another one. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived at the nurse's station during her shift. It had her name on it in sharp, bold letters. Inside, divorce papers. Caleb wanted the house, half of her savings. And, perhaps the cruelest of all, custody of Leo, their rescue dog. Her only real companion these days. The terms were brutal. Not because he needed the money or even wanted the house, but because he wanted to leave a scar. She stood in the hospital stairwell that day, gripping the papers so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she called her mother that night, hoping for comfort, all she got was the weight of silence on the other end of the line. And then, "You should have fought harder for your marriage," her mother said. Alina didn't respond. Because what do you say when the woman who raised you sides with the man who destroyed you? She tried reaching out to mutual friends. Some didn't reply. Others did, with awkward condolences and fake empathy that felt like salt. Honestly, Alina, Caleb always just wanted a little more spark. You've always been kind of distant. One of them even said, he needed passion. You were more of a routine. Each comment chipped at her ribs like invisible knives. She didn't go to work the next day, or the one after that. Instead, she stayed home and organized the kitchen cabinet Caleb had always mocked. You'll never get that thing in order, he'd once laughed. Your brain's too cluttered. Now, every label faced forward. Every container was lined up perfectly, like little soldiers waiting for command. At night, she sat on the cold kitchen floor with Leo curled in her lap. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew she needed him. And for the first time in years, she let herself lean on something. But not cry. She refused to cry in front of anyone. Instead, the pain burrowed deeper. It coiled itself around her chest and settled behind her ribs like a growing seed. She stared at the front door sometimes, imagining Caleb walking back in, laughing, pretending none of it mattered. And then she imagined something else. Not his return. Not reconciliation. But redemption. On her terms. Quiet. Calculated. Permanent. Because something inside Alina had unraveled. Not like a woman falling apart, but like a woman coming undone from the version of herself everyone expected. She wasn't knitting herself back the same way. She was stitching something new. Stronger. Sharper. Deadlier. And when it was done, Caleb would wish she'd stayed fragile. Alina disappeared without a goodbye. March. The air was still cold, the trees still bare, like her. She left Charlotte with 2 duffel bags, Leo curled up in the passenger seat, and no destination typed into her GPS. Just the pull of distance. No texts. No social media posts. No long letter on the kitchen counter. Even her landlord came home one day to find the apartment spotless and the keys folded into a napkin with one word. Thank you. She chose Asheville because it was just far enough to be invisible but close enough to stay dangerous. The mountain town was quiet. Green. Unassuming. She found a small 1-bedroom apartment above a bookstore and applied for a health policy and legal studies program at a nearby university, something she had whispered about years ago over dinner, back when she still believed Caleb listened. You? Law school, he had laughed. Alina, be serious. You're sweet, but that's too ambitious for someone like you. He said it with that same fake softness he always used when he wanted to clip her wings. Now, she didn't ask for permission. She got a job as a night shift nurse at a local clinic, a place where the patients were grateful and the staff didn't call her fragile. Every morning at 7 a.m., she'd walk home, sleep for 4 hours, then study until sundown. She learned the legal terminology Caleb once threw around to confuse her. She highlighted court case after court case, especially the ones involving healthcare negligence and female medical rights. And in the dim basement gym of her building, she started lifting. Quiet strength. 1 rep at a time. until the trembling in her hands disappeared completely. She didn't speak to anyone about her past. No one in Asheville knew who she had been, only who she was becoming. On the outside, Alina had vanished. Back in Charlotte, Caleb barely noticed. He assumed she'd moved in with her mother or checked herself into some kind of emotional retreat. A retreat was very Alina, he had told one friend. In his mind, she was broken, silenced. But one afternoon, scrolling aimlessly through LinkedIn while prepping for a new client presentation, Caleb's thumb paused. There it was. Her name. Alina Farrow, patient advocate, healthcare policy, and law founder at ReformHer. Her profile picture was simple. A white shirt. No makeup. Eyes steady. He didn't click. But he stared. Longer than he meant to. Because that word, founder, didn't fit the Alina he remembered. ReformHer. The name echoed. He scoffed. Told himself it was a vanity project. Nothing to worry about. The next week, his firm's managing partner called an emergency meeting. A viral petition had surfaced online. Over 40,000 signatures. National news coverage. It exposed a pattern of legal mishandling in female healthcare cases across North Carolina. At the center of it all was a well-researched report that cited real lawsuits, real victims. And in bold black letters, the name of Caleb's firm appeared near the top, tied to a 2017 negligence case that had been closed and forgotten. Until now, the case was being reopened. Caleb sat in that boardroom with his perfect jaw clenched, wondering who had the nerve. But he didn't connect the dots. Not yet. He still thought Alina was grieving. Still thought she was trying to heal. What he didn't realize was, she wasn't healing. She was arming herself. Alina disappeared without a goodbye. March. The air was still cold, the trees still bare, like her. She left Charlotte with 2 duffel bags, Leo curled up in the passenger seat, and no destination typed into her GPS. Just the pull of distance. No texts. No social media posts. No long letter on the kitchen counter. Even her landlord came home one day to find the apartment spotless and the keys folded into a napkin with one word. Thank you. She chose Asheville because it was just far enough to be invisible, but close enough to stay dangerous. The mountain town was quiet. Green. Unassuming. She found a small 1-bedroom apartment above a bookstore and applied for a health policy and legal studies program at a nearby university, something she had whispered about years ago over dinner, back when she still believed Caleb listened. You? Law school, he had laughed. Alina, be serious. You're sweet, but that's too ambitious for someone like you. He said it with that same fake softness he always used when he wanted to clip her wings. Now, she didn't ask for permission. She got a job as a night shift nurse at a local clinic, a place where the patients were grateful and the staff didn't call her fragile. Every morning at 7 a.m., she'd walk home, sleep for 4 hours, then study until sundown. She learned the legal terminology Caleb once threw around to confuse her. She highlighted court case after court case, especially the ones involving healthcare negligence and female medical rights. And in the dim basement gym of her building, she started lifting. Quiet strength. 1 rep at a time. Until the trembling in her hands disappeared completely. She didn't speak to anyone about her past. No one in Asheville knew who she had been. Only who she was becoming. On the outside, Alina had vanished. Back in Charlotte, Caleb barely noticed. He assumed she'd moved in with her mother or checked herself into some kind of emotional retreat. A retreat was very Alina, he had told one friend. In his mind, she was broken, silenced. But one afternoon, scrolling aimlessly through LinkedIn while prepping for a new client presentation, Caleb's thumb paused. There it was. Her name. Alina Farrow, patient advocate, healthcare policy, and law founder at ReformHer. Her profile picture was simple. A white shirt. No makeup. Eyes steady. He didn't click. But he stared. Longer than he meant to. Because that word, founder, didn't fit the Alina he remembered. ReformHer. The name echoed. He scoffed. Told himself it was a vanity project. Nothing to worry about. The next week, his firm's managing partner called an emergency meeting. A viral petition had surfaced online. Over 40,000 signatures. National news coverage. It exposed a pattern of legal mishandling in female healthcare cases across North Carolina. At the center of it all was a well-researched report that cited real lawsuits, real victims, and in bold black letters, the name of Caleb's firm appeared near the top, tied to a 2017 negligence case that had been closed and forgotten. Until now, the case was being reopened. Caleb sat in that boardroom with his perfect jaw clenched, wondering who had the nerve. But he didn't connect the dots. Not yet. He still thought Alina was grieving. Still thought she was trying to heal. What he didn't realize was, she wasn't healing. She was arming herself. The press conference came like thunder after weeks of eerie calm. Rain tapped lightly on the roof of the Civic Center as journalists filed in, murmuring, not realizing history was about to punch through the air like lightning. At the front of the room, behind a white podium with the Reform Her logo etched cleanly into it, stood a woman the city barely recognized. Alina Farrow. Not the wife. Not the nurse. Not the fragile thing Caleb used to ridicule in private. She stood tall, black blazer, eyes forward, her presence sharpened to a blade. Beside her sat Dr. Lila James, a woman in a wheelchair, once a promising surgeon, whose career had been ended after a surgical mishap left her partially paralyzed. Her malpractice suit was buried by a private firm. Buried until now. Alina introduced her softly. With facts. With documents. With names. She was told she signed the wrong consent form. That her pain was psychosomatic. Her voice wasn't just dismissed. It was erased. And then came the avalanche. Reform Her had, in the past 90 days, reopened 5 closed malpractice cases. Each involved women who were ignored, misdiagnosed, silenced, and each one had been quietly shut down by private legal interference. 3 of those cases traced directly back to Caleb's firm. And one had Caleb's actual signature on a now-contested NDA agreement, allegedly used to force a patient into silence. That signature was broadcast onto the projector behind Alina. Clean. Undeniable. When the press conference aired, Charlotte's media exploded. Caleb's name was dragged across every screen, every timeline. Within hours, Caleb's phone lit up like wildfire. His firm's managing partner called him in the middle of a deposition. "What the hell is your name doing in this?" He panicked, denied it all, blamed the junior staff, blamed old clerical errors. But then, Reform Her dropped another bomb. A recorded phone call, leaked publicly, between Caleb and a junior attorney. The voices were clear. "Just throw it under the pre-settlement clause," Caleb laughed. "Most of them don't even read past the first page. Especially if they're emotional." "You mean the patients?" "No, the women." The media dubbed it the Farrow leak. Alina's voice was not in that recording. She never pointed fingers. Never called Caleb out by name. She didn't need to. She simply sat on a morning show 3 days later, her hair in a low bun, no makeup, hands folded neatly, and said, "We don't need to burn anyone down. We just need to open the windows and let the truth be seen." And people listened, because it wasn't just about Caleb. It was about every woman who had ever been dismissed with a smile. Every woman told she was too emotional to be credible. The fallout came swiftly. One by one, clients pulled out from Caleb's firm. 1 dropped, then 2, then 10. Corporate accounts withdrew overnight. The board called an emergency meeting. Caleb was placed on indefinite leave. His name was stripped from the company website. Speaking gigs canceled. Charity invitations rescinded. His LinkedIn grew quiet. At his condo, he paced the floors alone, glass in hand, eyes bloodshot. He kept checking news articles, kept waiting for Alina to say his name. But she never did, because this was never about revenge in the way he understood it. She didn't destroy him. She simply let the world see who he already was. And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim her power. She rewrote the rules. One silent, brilliant move at a time. It was nearly midnight when she heard the knock. 3 slow taps. Not loud. Not desperate. Almost careful. Alina stood in her doorway in sweatpants and a Reform Her hoodie, Her dog Leo curled at her feet. The rain outside had left the world wet and shimmering. She opened the door. Caleb, hair tousled, face unshaven, holding a drenched bouquet of white lilies, the kind he used to bring home when he felt guilty or wanted something. In his other hand, a scarf. Her scarf. Soft beige wool. She'd forgotten it at his condo, a year ago. Alina, he breathed, his voice cracked and low. I made mistakes. I know I did. But you've made your point. Just please stop. This campaign, this whole thing, it's gone too far. He stepped forward slightly, trying to find the version of her he once controlled. But she didn't flinch. She simply stepped aside, letting the glow from her living room stretch across the hardwood floor like a line he wasn't invited to cross. He looked inside, and that's when he saw it. Photos lining the wall, Alina at conferences, Alina with senators, Alina standing next to mothers holding framed pictures of their daughters, Alina surrounded by nurses in white coats with bold red banners in the background. Behind her, the television played softly, a PBS documentary on women in medical history. Her face flickered on screen for a second before fading into B-roll footage. It wasn't a shrine to herself. It was a world she had built beyond him, one he couldn't touch. He dropped the flowers. They hit the floor with a muted thud, petals already bruising. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered. I thought you were too fragile for all this. Alina stared at him.
Calm. Cold.
You mocked my pain, she said. You called it drama. You laughed behind my back. You said I'd never do anything. She stepped closer. Not to intimidate, just to make it real. And now you're crying over your reputation, she added. He blinked, guilt spilling down his face. I lost everything, he said. The firm, the partnerships, the foundation seats. His voice trailed off like it mattered. She didn't reply. Because it didn't. He reached out to touch her hand, hoping for some trace of the woman who used to stand beside him at dinner parties and smile through the humiliation. She didn't pull away. But she didn't touch him either. I didn't ruin you, Caleb, she said softly. You did. He looked at her like a man realizing the ground beneath him had always been quicksand. There were no fireworks, no final fight, no grand speech, just silence. Heavy. Final. She nodded toward the scarf in his hand.
Keep it, she said.
To remember who I used to be. And then, gently, she closed the door. Not with rage, not with triumph, but with peace. On the other side, she leaned against the wood for a moment, not to cry, but to breathe. Leo nudged her leg. She smiled faintly. Behind her, the documentary continued. A narrator spoke. Some revolutions begin with marches. Others begin with silence, and the courage to refuse to stay small. The townhouse sat tucked into the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, surrounded by wild pines and the slow hum of wind weaving through trees. It wasn't big, just enough space for her, Leo, and a quiet life. The kind of life she once thought she'd have with someone. Now it was hers alone, and finally that felt like enough. Every morning, before the world stirred, Alina would brew black coffee in a copper kettle and watch the mist roll down the hills like a gentle secret. She'd lace up her boots, whistle for Leo, and they'd walk the wooded trail behind her home, her breath visible in the cool morning air, each step a reminder. She was still here.
Alive.
Standing. Rebuilt. She never mentioned Caleb again. Not to friends. Not in interviews. Not even to herself. His name became irrelevant, a ghost stripped of its haunting. He faded not because she tried to erase him, but because she no longer carried the weight of proving him wrong. She had already done that by existing exactly as she was always meant to. In the months following the press storm, reform her grew. Quietly at first, then rapidly. It expanded from a local awareness campaign to a national policy group, consulting on medical ethics reform and women's legal protections. Alina didn't chase the spotlight. She declined the podcasts, avoided the headlines. But still, her story moved. Not because she screamed it, but because she embodied it. When journalists asked her how it all started, her answer was always the same. Sometimes silence is the loudest resistance. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, her assistant knocked gently on the glass wall of her home office. "Someone's here to see you," she said. "No appointment. Says it's personal." Alina looked up from a legal brief, eyebrows raised.
Young.
"Maybe 19, the assistant added softly. "She's shaking." Alina nodded. Minutes later, the girl stepped inside. Wet hoodie, bitten fingernails, eyes wide but tired. She didn't speak at first. Just handed Alina a sealed envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. Slightly smudged. "I watched your story. I didn't even know people like you existed. I thought I was weak until I saw how you carried what happened to you and made it into something powerful. I'm starting over now. I found my courage. Thank you." There was no name signed at the bottom. Just a heart drawn with shaky lines. Alina didn't say much. She just smiled, walked to the shelf behind her desk, and opened a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of envelopes.
Notes.
Emails. Tiny tokens from women who had once believed their pain didn't matter. On the lid, carved by hand, were the words, "Unbroken." She added the new letter.
Gently.
As if it were sacred. Then, with quiet finality, she closed the lid. And for the first time in a long time, she spoke not to the world, not to the camera crews, not to the names from her past, but to the girl she used to be. The one who sat on a cold kitchen floor with a dog in her lap and betrayal in her heart. "You didn't lose," she whispered. "You changed the game."